really well, and it does some things not so well. So the things AI does well include like drafting or brainstorming, summarizing, formatting lessons, and differentiation. It does not do well with context, judgment, or policy, and we'll jump a little bit more into those and their backgrounds. But it's really really important to understand when we think about using AI for lesson planning, that we understand what the tools are good for and where they might lead us astray. And that's why where we will also talk about some guardrails that we can put into place to make sure that the tools that we're creating will be useful and strategic. So that first part of what we're looking at is one of the things AI does really well is helping with brainstorming ideas. So it's really good at helping you get past a blank page moment. I've talked, actually today I was working with several teachers and they said that they were using AI to help them come up with ideas for class starters. So thinking about areas where you're drawing a blank and you're like, I just need some ideas to get started on a project, an activity, a unit, being able to plug in and think and share back and forth with an AI can be super useful. Not sure how visible the little video is on the screen, but it's showing thinking about different activities for teaching fractions. And so what are some different real world scenarios that could be utilized with students? And I'll be sharing out the slides and the video so you'll have access to all of them. Another area that AI does really well is with structure. So it can take a big concept like a semester-long biology course and break it into logical units and sequences. It's great for organizing content into those digestible pieces or chunks and helping to create pacing guides or scaffold learning. And so that's another area that's super useful to utilize AI with it. AI also does really well with summarizing. So an example prompt that would utilize those summarizing skills, rewrite the science article summary for second grade reading level or draft parent newsletter, paragraph about an upcoming measurement unit. And so thinking about differentiation or communication in summarizing and paraphrasing work. AI also does well with templates. So you can ask AI to build you a reusable format, a lesson plan template, a reflection journal, or a rubric. And then once you have it, you can reuse it or ask it to adjust it depending on your needs. And so that helps create AI or utilizing AI as a personal assistant to you. And then the next thing AI also does well is the repetitive tasks, which hopefully is the main reason most of you are here. Like lesson planning, a lot of those repetitive things that we have to do, a lot of the requirements that you may or may not have to input for certain pieces, AI can do very efficiently, like drafting objectives in student-friendly language, generating exit tickets, creating bell ringers or questions for us, or formatting things consistently. Those aren't always glamorous things, but they definitely eat up our time. And so hopefully some of the tools we'll look at today will help save you time in those areas. So there are a couple things that AI doesn't do very well. And so the check-in question for you is, what's something AI couldn't possibly know about your students or your community? And so when we look at this one, AI is not going to know your students. It doesn't know their personalities. It doesn't know their strengths or what's going on in their lives. I know I'm giving you lots of answers for that question. It can't predict what will engage your class or what will flop. So anything AI generates still needs your professional judgment layered on top of it so that it can be modified to better fit your students and your community. So it can give you a potentially beautifully structured lesson, but it might assume that every student has a laptop or all students are reading on grade level. And so those are areas that when we are prompting, we're going to want to try and build in that context to make sure that our student needs and our community needs are being accessed and represented. So what AI also doesn't do well is local standards. And I noticed one of the pieces, there was a lot on assessments and also performance tasks. If we don't tell AI what assessment or what standards to use, it's going to do very generic standards. Some of the different programs, depending on what you're using, may pull from Common Core. Otherwise, it may just pull or make things up. And so having access to a standards document that you input in or telling it the specific standards you want it to cover will help make sure that it's aligning to whatever local standards are part of what you are teaching. And that's a part of where you need to make sure to check that it is hitting the correct standards or learning targets that you want it to hit. 'Cause sometimes it just likes to make things up that it thinks you will like, depending on what's been generated before. So for example, AI might generate a math lesson aligned to Common Core, but your district pacing guide could use a different order or emphasis. And again, a lot of the AI programs will allow you to upload your standards or your pacing guide to assist in creating specific plans or units. Are there any questions so far? I feel like I'm going fast. All right. AI also doesn't, a lot of things are accurate, but AI is overconfident. So think about some of your students that might say something and they feel that they are always right. That is what AI believes. So it will be super confident that it knows the answer, but it's not always the correct answer. It can generate misinformation. It will mix up concepts. It cites made up research. The citing made up research happens all the time. So it's extremely important to always verify content, especially with science, history, or database lessons. And if it gives you something that looks perfect, pause and ask, is this actually true? So we need to fact check what we get from AI. The reason the generative AIs give misinformation, the makeup stuff and hallucinations, they're not completely confident about why it does that. But for the misinformation, it's pulling the data that AI uses is pulled from all over the internet. And the first data sources that were used were Reddit and Facebook and other social media sites. And so we know that a lot of misinformation is on those sites. Things aren't always accurate. And there's a lot of information, and generative AI is not capable of differentiating fact and bias. And so it will pull from all of those sources with a pretty equal footing, depending on how much of it is available. And so that's where we can end up with misinformation, mixed up concepts, or made up research. And so it also depends on what information is available to it. An English example, I'd asked it to write an essay. I wanted to see what it was capable of doing for essay writing, and I asked it to write an essay about the Outsiders novel, and it gave me misinformation about when certain events happened in the book, and even who the characters in the book were. And so that's a book-related one, but again, especially around science or history or database lessons, we want to just fact check the AI and make sure it's accurate. And then the last piece of things that AI doesn't do well is that professionalism piece. So it can't capture your why behind your teaching choices. It doesn't know the culture of your classroom, your emotional tone that you're trying to set, or the connections that you've built with your students. It can support you in planning, but you still need to be the decision maker behind that planning. So in short, it is really great at drafting, organizing, and generating ideas, but it's not yet capable of teaching, discerning, or adapting like we can. And so it makes a great partner in supporting us with some of that repetitive, time-consuming work, but it is definitely not replacing us anytime soon. So the next piece is looking at just some of the guardrails that we want to make sure we have in place. And a lot of these were already mentioned kind of as we went through what AI does well and doesn't do well. And that first piece is making sure that, again, we check for accuracy. We want to make sure we're maintaining student privacy. If you're using programs like the free versions, especially of different AI software, a lot of the free versions are learning from you. And so everything that you put in, it's using that data and that information to learn and make itself better. And so we want to be extremely careful that we're not inputting any kind of student personal information into those programs. There are several programs. If you're one of our Google schools, Google Gemini, if that's been unblocked for you, it now is embedded in the education, Google for Education. And so it is FERPA and COPA compliant. It does not utilize, it doesn't learn from what we input from it in the education sphere. So as long as you're logged in and using it with your school email address, and again, if it's been turned on for that, then that is safe to use. School AI has a signed agreement with the ESD, and so if your schools have signed on with that and you have access to School AI, even their free version will be FERPA and COPA compliance as well. Again, watching out for bias, always kind of supervising the outputs, and then making sure that they're aligned with your curriculum and your standards. Okay, any questions on the background pieces of what we need to be ready for before jumping into lesson planning? Okay. So the power of prompting. Prompting is extremely important. I think several of you had attended some of the sessions at the PD Summit last Friday, and several of those did discuss and talk about prompting. Prompting is extremely important in how you prompt to get different outputs. So the quality of your prompt is going to indicate the quality of what you get out of the generative AI programs. So if you put in something like create a 2-week unit on ecosystems for 5th grade, and if I put this into ChatGPT, I get a very generic plan. The Web of Life, 2 weeks, 10 class periods, 45 to 60 minutes. It aligned it to some standards, but maybe those aren't the standards I want. And then this is the weekly outline that it's given me. If I then move on to looking at a more detailed prompt, this one is starting with you're an experienced 5th grade science teacher. So I'm giving it a specific role. I'm telling generative AI what context it needs to be coming from. I want it to create a detailed 2-week unit plan on ecosystems and food webs aligned to these specific standards. I want it to develop a model, or I want to develop a model to describe the movement of matter among plants, animals, decomposers in the environment. I want it to include essential questions. I want it to provide 10 sequential lessons, which include learning objectives, vocab, an activity, and a formative check, and end with a project. And so if I take this plan and I plug this in as a new chat, show you two. you can immediately see that there are differences in just the amount of background information it's giving me, the day-to-day of what I'm doing or what it's provided. And it's also recommending either resources or materials that are needed for each of these. And then giving a rubric for the project, providing differentiation and extensions. And so that prompting provided way more details and outcomes. So this is a generic prompt. It is very detailed. You can ask any of the generative AI programs to assist you in creating a prompt. And so after I'd input the first one, I told it, ChatGPT, that I wanted it to assist me in creating a prompt that would give me a better output. And this is one of the things that it came up with. So you wouldn't have to use every piece that's on here, but you're looking at, you are an experienced curriculum designer or you're an experienced teacher. Create a detailed, how long of a plan do you want? What topic is it on? What grade level is it for? And what standards is it aligned to? What do you want included in that lesson plan? And is there any other specific information that you need to have with that? And then you can ask some follow-up questions to it as well. You can ask about deepening alignment, so like revise this unit to emphasize scientific modeling. You can look at differentiation and say, I need support from my ELL students, so I need sentence stems or vocabulary visuals. You could have some integration across subjects, so putting in a literacy component to connect it to English. So that is just like a quick demo on the importance of prompting and making sure that you are meeting really three key things: that you've got the context, the topic, and the format that you want any of the generative AI programs to create a solid output for you. So when we look at planning, there were a couple of you that said you were interested in long-term plans or plan development. And so for a lot of that, when you're using AI to support you, you want to think about the backwards design and curriculum mapping, unit planning, like what's the end result that students are doing first to get there. And then some of these go hand in hand depending on the AI program that you're using. You can use it to create detailed plans around daily or weekly lessons, and then for sub and emergency plans. And these, like some of those best practices would be to have things that are not AI related or created at the last minute, but also then AI can help you create some low tech plans or low material plans that you can put in for those. So we're going to take a look at developing some different lesson plans and ideas. So this program is School AI. School AI is free. You may have to log in through email and you'd still be able to use your school or work email, but it would have to be through email and not through Google, because some of our IT departments, like mine, have the Google connections blocked a little bit more stringently in connecting it directly to Google. So for this one, the reason I use School AI, and I will actually start over. Dot or School AI is specifically designed for education. And so a lot of those prompting pieces that you would need to put in ChatGPT or in Google Gemini, you don't have to do with School AI, because it's already making assumptions about you as a teacher and the needs that teachers have and some of the requirements for those different teacher documents. Some other benefits with School AI is it will allow you to send things that you create directly to your Google Drive, a Google Doc, or Google Classroom. So when we get to materials creation, School AI can be super helpful for that. And then the other thing it does is some back and forth. And so if I put in a very generic, not super helpful prompt, like I need help creating a curriculum map and pacing guide for a new class, it's going to start by asking me questions to figure out what it is that I need and creating that. So this one is much more of like a teacher assistant versus Gemini or ChatGPT, where you would have to do the prompting and give it that information because it's not going to ask for it. And so it's saying, my teacher, what course, what subject grade, what are the length of my semesters, what are the minutes per period, start date, and standards or curriculum. So I'll go back to one that I already did. And so I said, consider me a teacher. I'm teaching 7th grade social studies. We use quarters. I need to plan quarter 2, 3, and 4. I've done basic geography and cartography, but the rest of the year I want to focus on historical and current study of the North American continent. So then it's mapping out and it gives me kind of a summary of what it's going to do for each of those. And so at any point in time, I'm able to chat back and forth with it to get it to adjust those plans. So if I decide that I don't like where it's going or something that it's doing, I can talk about that. Its spiraling skills are looking at sourcing, claim evidence reasoning, map and graph literacy, and argument writing and discussion. And so then it's giving me those 9-week quarters. And I've got my unit 1, my unit 2, my unit 3, my culminating task. And then if I scroll down to where it asks for more information, I told it to redo it and align it to Oregon social science standards and to make sure to embed the literacy standards into that. And so again, it kind of talked about where it was doing that and some inquiry tasks and writing products that would be aligned to those different pieces. And then the next piece it asked me is about timing and pacing, so it could actually create a pacing guide for me. So I told it I was at a 4-day week school. Our quarters were 9 weeks. I gave it a start date for my quarter 2 and the breaks that were coming up. And then it created a document for me. And then I have the ability to edit this document and export this document into a Google Doc, Microsoft Word, or PDF. So this is especially helpful if you are then creating subplans with it or you're sharing it. And so now it's given me a much deeper plan with a week-by-week pacing calendar for each of those quarters. So this is the part where you could then dig deeper. I could ask it for specific lessons. So I need detailed lessons. And then it's going to be able to generate information for me on that. And so it's talking about what is the focus, what are the products that students should be coming up with, what are my standards, and then the day-by-day pieces, some materials that it thinks that I should have, and at any point I can go in and say I don't have these materials or I don't want to do stations, and it will adjust those for me. So now in the last 5 minutes, I've been able to create like a 3-quarter plan with units, with 3 big units, and then a week specific daily plans that I could print out and easily use or modify. Any questions so far? So within these, for this, it talks about formative checks or homework, research questions. So in this part, it's talking about a mini lesson. And so I'm going to ask it to create the materials that it suggested for that lesson. So it said that there would be a mini lesson on what USMCA is, in simple terms, tariff supply chains comparative advantage. It's going to give me the lesson objectives, and then a slide by slide, so potentially what could be on the slides, what I could be talking about with students, some scripting if you needed it. So this would be helpful, especially with the sub piece. And so it's given me the information that I need to now teach that topic in a 10-minute mini lesson. Including differentiation, checks for understanding, and then alignment to standards. It's offered to make me a handout, so I'm going to go ahead and have it do that for me. And then while it's doing this, several of you listed also subplans. There were a lot of interest in using subplans or using AI to develop subplans. Would one or more of you please drop in like a 1 to 3 day, what would you be looking for in a subplan? So if you needed a 1-day subplan or a week-long subplan, so length of time and what you would be needing or looking for, and we'll try and do a couple run-throughs of what that could look like. And then for those that are following me right now, it gave me a worksheet, but it gave it to me over in the chat piece, and I wanted it to give it to me as an actual doc that I could either edit or export. So I told it to do that, and that is what it just supplied for me. So this would be the handout that I could print and give to students or modify if I felt that there wasn't quite enough here. And again, a lot of these same things can be done on any of the generative AI platforms that you have access to. And so we'll actually try ChatGPT for the next one, just so you can kind of see the difference in what that would look like. Elementary is definitely more of a struggle when it comes to lesson plans, just because you have the students all day and it's a lot more challenging and difficult. And hopefully there are some already pre-packaged curriculum that you're able to use and just say, like, follow this part of the lesson. But for some of the other stuff, we can definitely look at what are some things that you could create that still follows as much as possible the key parts of your lesson and piece. Okay, I like the copyright and fair use. I think, John, that you are a middle school, so I'm going to tell it, and you can say you're a middle school. So you are an expert middle school art media teacher. You develop a 1-day lesson plan for a sub using minimal materials or Chromebooks. I think you guys have access to Chromebooks. On fair use and copyrights. And And then this is where you could potentially add in extra pieces. So depending on whether or not you wanted it on computers, you wanted it on paper, we'll go ahead and we'll say computers so they can give me other online ideas. I could one day lesson plan. Lesson plan for a sub using minimal materials. We'll see what it gives us with just this one. So I gave it the context and I gave it the format, but I didn't give it a lot of details on the content. So it's saying it's 6th through 8th grade, 50 to 60 minutes, so I didn't give it a specific time, so that may be something I need to do. It's giving me these types of materials, so if I knew something wasn't available, I would just ask it to redo it without those materials. These are the learning objectives, so I'd want to make sure that that matches with what I wanted. And so the essential question it's giving me for the lesson is, how can artists and creators use existing work responsibly while respecting copyright? It's got a 5 to 10 minute hook. And so it's giving directions for the sub, because it is a sub. If you found a picture online and wanted to use it in a project, what could you do? Record responses on board or have them answer on paper. Discuss key terms. And then it's got tips for sub. Examples students know, like music, memes, movie clips, things they might find relatable. They've got a mini lesson, and this is where I could ask it to create a guide for me. One thing that AI, the free versions of AI currently do not do well is create slides. They will create outlines of slides for you that you can copy and paste. If you ask it to give you speaking notes to give to subs, it will give you that information, but it does not create graphic slides for you unless you're using one of the more expensive paid programs. So there are a couple programs out there that are really cool and actually can do slides decently well, but they all require payment to access at all. So for now, we don't have access to anything that creates slides really well and does really effective slides. So the best way to get around that is to say, like, for this mini lesson, if I wanted slides to go with it, I'd need to tell it to create that. It's got guided practice, independent. So we'll start with this one. So it says give scenario analysis. So I'm asking it to actually create the 5 scenarios, because right now it didn't give me those. I'm going to need them for students to be able to use. So these are some of the different scenarios that it's come up with for students to decide if it's fair use or copyright and why. I could then go back and ask it to also give me any other part of this. And so again, with the ChatGPT or some of the other generative AI pieces, it's a back and forth. You are not able to generally export from ChatGPT unless you're paying for it. And I have the free version. So if you like something, you have to copy and paste it into Google Docs. And so again, that's where using that school AI program potentially has some benefits, because you can export right from it. So John, hopefully that seemed like a decent lesson that you could then kind of piggyback off of or add to. So 1st grade is definitely a little bit more challenging, a lot more challenging. So let's see what it will come up with. You are an expert curriculum designer and teacher. Create 1st grade full day blow prep emergency subplans. I would probably want to tie in some standards of what I'm teaching. Easy, engaging activities with math and phonics practice. Like with the phonics practice, I would probably list, since we're at 1st grade, the specific letters or sounds or words. Like if we were on CBC words, I would put that in if we were practicing like the AE or AI, I would put that in just so that it had a little bit more direction. Same with the math piece. If it's creating math activities for me, what specific math activity do I want it to be creating? This is also where for either ChatGPT, ChatGPT does not do it on the free version anymore. This is where School AI is super helpful, because on the School AI, you've got this little upload files. So if you already have like your agenda for the day, you can upload your agenda into this and then ask it to create emergency subplans based off that agenda. So it's still following the outline that you have for the day. You can also upload a couple other worksheets and say, make something new that looks like this, but practices this skill. So that's another advantage with the School AI is you can upload that program. Cody, thank you for sharing Gamma with slides. I'll have to look at that and see what it does. Okay, so this is what it created for first grade on ChatGPT without input on what the day should look like. So if you had a true emergency and up and left and there was absolutely nothing for the sub would at least have something that they could potentially follow throughout the day, assuming they didn't have small groups or pullouts. And so that would be things that you would tell it or put in. It's giving you ideas. And again, for any of these that you want, you would then just copy and paste and ask it to create those specific documents that you wanted from it. Okay, are there any questions on these pieces before we jump to the last piece? All right, we're super chatty. Our last thing that we're going to look at then is crafting materials. So we did that a little bit. I'll show you another program that has a free version for those that really need to differentiate materials. And it's also really good for creating a variety of other materials for your classes. Any of the other programs will create the worksheets, assessments, models, activities, or projects with the right prompting. So it may take some back and forth with the program. It may take you asking it to help you develop the prompt. But the idea is that if you need worksheets for something, assessments, models, or activities, you should be able to have AI help you develop those or help develop ideas of what you could do for those. So, for example, if you are teaching fractions, so I need ideas for reviewing common denominator fractions for fourth graders. That is a fun and engaging activity. And so then it's giving me some ideas of ways that I might review fractions that they've already learned. So having it kind of brainstorm with you, and then again, I could take any of these and ask it to give me more in-depth pieces to make the cards for me, or make the rules, or actually like list out more details on those. For some of the other pieces, I recommend using Diffit. Diffit was originally designed specifically as a differentiation website. It has a free version that has quite a bit that's accessible with the free version. And so in the first part, you are able to tell it to create content for you. This I find especially helpful with elementary. When you are trying to do at the elementary level, like research papers, you have a very limited amount of books you have access to, and then a lot of the things that you look up online are way outside of the readability level of your students. So you can either plug in a specific website or even content that you want it to create and help it level that down to the level of your students. They do have kindergarten and first grade on here, which is new, but since kindergarten, first and second grade are generally learning to read versus reading to learn, like the readability, it's more geared towards like if a teacher was reading this and it's at their comprehension level versus them being able to decode and read it themselves at that kindergarten or first grade level. So it's not going to create decodables for you right now. It will create information or fictional text if you're asking it to create or generate content for you. The books pieces, it gives you a couple chapters on the free version, and so you can definitely explore some resources that it can give you with books. But the big piece that it gives you is that you have students in your class, like if you have a PDF that you've previously used and it's a printout, you can upload it onto here, and you can even preserve the original text if it doesn't have any questions and you want it to give you resources. But the other big piece that you can do with any of those is you can differentiate it to a new reading level. So if you have students that are on modified diplomas, or if you have other IEP students that need modifications or accommodations, if you're in elementary and you need to further differentiate the reading, this will allow you to do that. And you can plug in a YouTube video, a website link, a text, or PDF to help it differentiate whatever that piece is for you. I will call one of my current ones. So depending on where you pull your resources or what you're looking for, it's going to give you a reading and summary. And you can also change the language. So if you have students learning in other languages and you need those, you can ask it to change the language for you. You can ask it to modify the length and make something longer or shorter. A lot of times when I've seen differentiated pieces, when we're differentiating down grade levels, it reduces the amount of reading. And a lot of our students don't need a reduced amount of reading, they need a reading that's accessible. And so this potentially keeps the content and the paragraphing the same, but it makes the reading accessible to the student. So I want a longer piece. I can change the grade level of the reading to make it more rigorous or less rigorous. And then again, this is also a really great website to use if you know you're going to have a sub and you want to use a learning video from YouTube. You can plug in that video's URL and it will give you a reading summary, but then it will also give you vocabulary, and it will give you multiple choice questions, and it will give you short answer questions. And all of those are part of the free version. So you have access to quite a few things. You're able to modify the vocabulary and modify the questions. But it's a great thing that you can easily and quickly print off, and you can modify and have a couple different copies for different students in your class or for subs. Oh, that's a quick tool that I showed you. You're also talking about, I saw something else too about creating performance tasks. And so that would be any of the generative AI programs. And for creating those performance tasks, you would just want to very specifically specify the expectations, possibly upload the rubric that you wanted to use and the outcomes, and then ask it to generate some of those performance task activities for you. But it should be able to do that with the right prompting. right, are there any questions on what we've covered or looked at? Okay. Please feel free to reach out if you do have questions. If you would like a little bit more support specifically with AI or lesson planning. And then I hope that this has been useful. I would love your feedback on any improvements that you see in either the formatting, how to make it more interactive or informational, or what you would like to see done differently or what you thought went well. Thank you for coming. And then you can see that we do have some more tech talks coming up, and I hope you're able to attend those.